Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. Welcome. This is a panel about diversity in football. Sometimes I will say soccer. Sorry about that. Based in Miami, and even though I'm Dutch, I don't know. I keep on saying soccer sometimes. But we're at Soccer X, so why not? Before I introduce the people next to me, who are actually the most important ones here. I have to introduce myself. My name is Maurice Ouderland, originally from the Netherlands, now based in Miami. Before I start, who thinks diversity at all is a topic in football? Okay, cool.
If not, leave the room.
It's an open question, but still. Because to me it is. It's always been. I owe a lot to football. I think football has a strength to educate and unite. And when I was a little boy of 7 years old, I played with boys that were from all kinds of backgrounds. And you learn to embrace each other's differences and also see where the unity lays. And I think up till today, it helps me a lot in understanding cultures, but also in sometimes waiting to judge. It helped me in my previous job. I was working for the federation, the Dutch Federation, KNVB, where we had to make an awareness campaign against racism. That became the One Love campaign. I think most people have heard of it. I'm surprised how many people have heard of it. But One Love stands for the same thing. We're all the same, we're all united, and we all love football. So with that said, that is me. So otherwise you're like, yeah, nice. These four people are great, but who's the bald dude? So now you know. I'm gonna give the word from left to right. A short introduction, even though we got some time, but short introduction, who you are, and what role football plays in your life.
Hi everyone, my name's Cigdem Turkan. That's a Turkish name. I'm from Cyprus originally, but I live and work in the UK, thanks to my parents making the move. Football plays a massive role in my life, so I think that's a big question for me to answer quickly. But I work for the Professional Game Academy Audit Company, which is a subsidiary of the Premier League. We audit the academy system, and we've recently taken on the women's game as well as the boys, and I lead that as a project area at PGMOL. Additionally, I 24/7 football if I can, to be honest with you. Social life football, I started my own team in memory of my late father. It's our first season running, and we do a lot of work around, as you said, some of the bringing the positives of football together, using football as a force for good. And I do some other bits with my local team, Arsenal. On a match day, I'm a licensing and compliance officer, so I try to keep myself as active in football as possible. So yeah, 24/7 for me.
Hi everybody, my name's Tajean Hutton. I am the head of grassroots and community at an organisation by the name of Kick It Out that basically deals with or helps to combat discrimination in football within England. The usual story, everybody's saying that football's everything to me. I do what I do on a 9-to-5 basis with Kick It Out. I run my local youth football club in my local area in North West London. I run the charity arm of that football club in North West London too. I've been coaching for about 15 years now, so my wife will tell me that I love football more than her, which is, I do. She's not here, so I can say that out loud. But yeah, I fell in love with football because from the age of about 11, my dad was my coach, and I saw firsthand how football can change the lives of other people. I didn't need football to change my life because I've had a relatively good upbringing, albeit in a rough area, which is a very common story, but I saw how football can be used to change the lives of other people who generally need their lives to be changed. And I always wanted to be that person to do it for other people, so I'm very fortunate and blessed to be in this position.
All right, my name is Gerkes. Football is a massive role in my life as well. I started playing when I was around 7 years old. Around the age of 21, I started with Gerkes. That's my own company in social media. I'm a content creator with over 300k followers right now. So we go to different clubs. We go with pro players. A few weeks ago, we were in Barcelona. We went to Espanyol. We have been at Everton, Man City, and otherwise really amazing players and clubs we have met. So yeah, it plays a massive role in my life. I still play at a club, local club, so the guys are more interested in the beer than in the game. But it's still amazing to be there, and yeah, football is everything in my life, and yeah.
Hi everyone, my name's Arran Williams. I'm the head of PGMOL's EDI function, so we look after everything around representation, recruitment, and how people experience officiating in the professional game in England, right from the Premier League down to the National League and the Women's Super League and Championship. And again, much like the panel here, fell in love with football probably for the same reasons you all did, because it was the great leveler in society. It's the bit where you could be from the most toughest, most difficult backgrounds and playing a World Cup final. You could be somebody who has experienced some of the most horrendous things in life and experienced the greatest highs representing your team, your country. And I think that's just a common denominator amongst everyone in football. And much like Maurice said, it's that one love element. We've all got the same part. And that then drives forward the philosophy of actually how do we make sure everyone experiences football in that way.
So having that said, I mean, I have a question that is, but I have to ask a question before. What is, according to you, and this is the only question I hope I'm going to ask all of you, is what is the current status of, and diversity as a whole is a whole phrase. I mean, maybe the question should be, what is diversity to you, and what is the status of it? Can any of you elaborate on that? It's a difficult question because diversity, everybody has an idea, but what is it? What is it to you? For me, before you answer, I think it's great in this panel. Just so you don't, maybe you don't know, you haven't met, just briefly, short, but that's the one thing I love about doing stuff like this. But with Dennis here, that to me is new. And we spoke about that yesterday, we met yesterday. Normally when we talk about diversity, it's either cultural backgrounds, color of skin, sexual preferences. But I've never sat down with somebody that is often overlooked, I think, when it comes to diversity. So what is diversity to you?
To me, I think it's probably that everyone is equal, that no matter what ethnicity, color of skin, the way you look, how you feel. I think everybody has to be equal and has to be the same opportunities. Of course, not everybody has the same talents, that's logical, but I think everybody has to have the same opportunity to do what they love.
You have a slogan, it says, living with
no limitations.
Okay.
Can I just add that for me, diversity has to go beyond the things that we can see. We have to start understanding the differences in people's way of thinking, the way they've been brought up. A few of us mentioned our upbringing here. Socioeconomic background impacts the way we then present ourselves in environments. And we need to give people that level of understanding to really understand the true diversity of individuals. So I won't be the same as every Turkish Cypriot person you meet. I definitely won't be the same as every girl you meet, that's for sure. My mum can tell you that for sure. She's struggled with having a daughter that didn't fit in those boxes, right? But the way we think, the way we communicate, the way we share perspectives, that's all going to be different. And I think diversity needs to really be beyond the physical, needs to be beyond the things that we can see and people can explain to us. And I think that's where you start to get into the nitty-gritty of what diversity means to people, because we would define diversity very differently, and therefore in our various roles we will present that differently. Arran might put together something that he thinks is really great, and I'll say, well, you're still missing me out. I still can't access some of that provision that you've put on. So yeah, we just have to go beyond what we can see in a photo. And a great example of that is the Arsenal women's team. They got a lot of slack in the UK for not having a diverse team and being in North London, which is known to be diverse. But if you looked at the individuals within that photo, yes, they didn't look diverse, but that was a lot of foreign talent that is foreign to the UK, which presents its own level of diversity. So yeah, I think that's an important one.
Can I just echo that to answer the latter part of your question, which was where do we feel football is, the current status of diversity within football. One of my favourite films ever is a film called Shrek. I don't know if anybody's seen it. And if anybody hasn't seen it, Shrek is a film basically following an ogre who's on a quest to save a princess with a talking donkey. And in the film, the ogre looks at the talking donkey and says, what do you think that Shrek, that ogres and onions have in common? And then the donkey says, you guys all stink. He's like, no. He's like, I'm not sure. He's like, we have layers. Ogres have layers. And in answer to your question, I love that because I take crazy narratives from films that mean nothing to do with anything, but I love that because for me, that's a perfect depiction about where we are with diversity and where diversity currently stands. Is diversity is all about layers. There's so many layers to, as you said, rightfully said, is you can have a woman. You break down the layers of what woman is. You have an Asian woman, then you have a black woman, and you might have a Latin woman. Then you break down further constructs even more. You may have a black Caribbean woman. You may have a black African woman. These are all different versions or different variations of diversity. But in answer to the latter part of the question, football is in a very lazy status at the moment when it comes to diversity. Just because tying it back into Shrek, you haven't pulled back the layers. We're still looking at diversity as a whole onion. And as a result, we think that we can just lump one solution to all of diversity's problems. So everybody, as rightfully said, will have a different answer. But from my perspective, football's in a very lazy status at the moment because we're just looking at a one-size-fits-all answer to the diversity problems.
Exactly that. And you know, when we think about the answer that's kind of been provided there, and we think about how football looks, and we talk about whether it's around black and Asian as an example, whether it's around addressing women's representation in football as a whole, it negates the experience of that person. And fundamentally, that's what makes football beautiful, the experience and how we all, in our own individual way, experience football. So touching on those parts around the layers, touching on what Cigdem said earlier and Dennis, we've got to get away from this idea of going, we're going to take a huge population of people and say they all have the same experience. Because fundamentally, that's factually incorrect. And we need to break that down through those layers to understand how they experience football. And only then can we start to build up, whether it's around representation, whether it's around experience, whether it's around something else that addresses that, their experience of football and sport more broadly, and you know, even wider society. Only then will we start to address some of the issues that we've seen manifest itself in football forever.
So the only constant is football itself. You know, the rest still needs. So is football the problem or the solution? It's a tough question, but it's both.
It fits in both ways, doesn't it? You know, we have this situation where football is effectively a reflection of society. It's a microcosm of what happens out on the streets. And we see that in the stands, we see that in the interactions between players, officials, and everyone who is a stakeholder in football. How you present at sport will be completely different to how you present in life. And in that sense, we sometimes either mask or unmask our real selves with that. But it's no mistaking, and you know, we only have to look at the stats around discrimination reporting. Yes, undoubtedly, people will become more confident to report, have become more trusting that the process will work for them. But you know, in all of particularly Western European societies and so on, we've seen huge increases in political far-right movements, etc., and hate crime in the streets, which then can manifest itself in football as well.
I want to give a slight spin on that, which I 100% agree. I personally believe that it's neither. One of my biggest gripes with human beings is we are very quick to pass on the blame to things in regards to when something goes wrong. If you're looking at what the constructs of what makes football, it's a surface area, lines if you need them, a ball, and goals made of either a frame or your bags or your coats or whatever. It's a tool. The issue is human beings. And if you take away football away from the equation, human beings are still going to be racist. Human beings are still going to be homophobic, sexist, whatever type of discrimination you want to utilize or refer to. It's the same way if you put a gun or a knife on the floor, it's not going to be used unless a human picks it up and uses it. So I don't see football as neither the problem nor the solution, but football can be used as a tool to be either the problem or the solution. The issue is us as human beings. And we've never, throughout history, gone through a consistent phase of taking accountability for our actions without passing the blame onto something else. There's one famous saying in the world that people like to use out of context, which is money is the root of all evil, which is factually incorrect because the actual phrase goes, the love of money is the root of all evil. It's not the money itself, it's our desire for it that makes us do certain things that we shouldn't be doing for the pursuit of it. So it's not necessarily about football being a bad or good thing, it's about how do us as human beings utilize it for good or bad, from my viewpoint.
So if we want to, I like that one. If we want to use the love of football for good, it's almost one love, but I'm not here to advocate for that too much. But how can we start peeling off the layers? Where do we start, or where do the people that are in control, what tools do we need to give them to start? Anybody?
Well, firstly, from a diversity perspective, and again, I'm going to be speaking more from a UK perspective and what we're used to. I think, I guess in relation to the lazy term that you used, we've, in the UK, got gatekeepers to what I would describe as the work in diversity. So I get approached a lot for, wouldn't you take this role within the equality, diversity and inclusion part of an organisation? And I always say, well, why would you take a diverse practitioner out of actually doing the work and having impact day to day? Me being in the roles that I am allows for there to be diversity. Why would you take me out then and say that I'm going to do work to diversify the workforce? And those gatekeepers are then having to do work that appeases people from a visible diversity perspective. And then we start to really pigeonhole the work rather than it being a more consultative process where you're engaging more stakeholders, where we might find more diversity. So fan bases outside of the stadia are more diverse than the ones that get into the stadia, because I don't really believe that football is that diverse in the stadia, because we've outpriced a lot of people. Again, when we talk about it's just a field and a couple of cones and whatever, I think we've outpriced a lot of people from that as well now. It was on one of the panels, actually. One of the guys said, look, it's like €100. Some people can't afford that €100. To you, that might be cheap. Some people can't afford that. So I think the more we try to pigeonhole and direct work and target EDI and diversity, we probably lose sight of who we're actually trying to engage or who we're trying to represent. And another thing that we don't do very well in the UK is trying to say, well, you have some form of lived experience where you've experienced some form of discrimination, or you've had to live with a protected characteristic as we describe it in the UK. Therefore, you would be great for this role. And then we don't buy into the stuff that somebody who may not be from a protected characteristic background, in the UK, we will say like a middle-aged white man. So we wouldn't believe or trust in the work that this middle-aged white man is doing, which they could be doing it from a really good place with really good intentions. We should stop expecting someone to look like the diversity before we buy into what they're doing in that space. We should really start to give people credit for what they want to do and their intentions behind it. Nobody's going to get it right, and I don't think we're going to solve it in a very short-term process. So it probably just, people need to just relax on it a little bit, in my opinion. I think we're going so far the other end that we're starting to block out some of the stuff that it is really important, and that's the human side of it. What is the actual impact of the work we're doing, rather than, you know, how well is this going to look on the board report?
Amen to that. Here's a white middle-aged guy sitting, trying to do my best. Dennis, how do you experience diversity in football? I mean, I've looked at your TikTok channel. I don't even have TikTok. So I went out and looked at it. And I think it's great how you mix, let's say, people that are not discriminated at all, together with your tricks. What did you run into on the way getting there? Because I think you have embraced it.
Oh yeah, a couple of times. I think when I started, when I was around 1 month on TikTok, the hate comments started getting in. It was about 80% was hate comments, and 20% was normal. So 80% was, you look like a T-Rex, give me a high five and I will follow you. You look like the Sean Paul, I don't know, the perfume guy, all these type of examples. So some are really creative, like Ronaldinho and stuff, and you're like, okay, fair. And sometimes you're like, okay, come with something new at some point, because in the last 3 years, the comments didn't change. So the percentage of the thing, so it's now not 80-20 anymore, it's more like 60-40, but there's still a lot of. And with the GIFs on Instagram, you got GIFs like 2 seconds video where you can post underneath a video. I think at least if I got 500 comments, 250 are like T-Rex. So yeah, it's a couple of times it happened.
But still, you keep going.
Yeah,
you're peeling off the layers
yeah,
by
peeling
yourself,
off the layers for sure.
which I admire a lot. What do we see currently as obstacles for peeling the onion? I like that one. What do we see that we run into? What makes the greatest sport in the world, in my view, still so lazy about this topic?
I think a lot of people are not used to seeing new things. For example, when I am on the pitch with my soccer team, I have a couple times, the guy with a disability, let's take it easy on him. So for the first 20 minutes when I was a child, I got free space everywhere on the field. So, but when I dribbled by them or give them a nutmeg, it was fair game suddenly. So yeah, I think people aren't changed to new, aren't aware or used to new things. So when those things happen, it's new, and they will push away from it. But when they get used to it, and that's how with my TikTok and social media, at some point there was like a turning point, and people are seeing it often. Of course, there are a lot of immature and rude people, but a lot of people are great and good. So I think at one point people will respect, accept it, because it's not like abnormal anymore.
How is that for you, Arran?
Yeah, when we look at that experience bit, one of the biggest problems that I certainly would highlight to people in the room is our experiences can't be reduced to zeros and ones. And that for me is fundamentally one of the biggest challenges. We spoke earlier around almost like a census collection that happens within football often, and you end up in the 0.01%. So all of a sudden your experience doesn't matter because you are so insignificant, you're not part of the wider target audience of football. Your experiences of discrimination, also positives, are reduced into, on a scale of 1 to 7, how do you feel about this? And it's bigger than that. It has to be bigger than that. And we've got to get to this point where people are comfortable in having uncomfortable conversations, but also are comfortable once those conversations have happened to go, let's work together to create action that is tangible, that attacks those layers, rather than just looking and going, we're going to look at one group as an entirety of a population and kind of let's just put a little bit towards that or something towards doing that.
So that the 0% conversation we had earlier, and for context, that was where we were talking about sort of like diversity forms. And I know that I've taken part in surveys, and I know that that survey's been sort of like presented back to me at work. And I don't fit into any of the categories. So I don't fit into white, I don't fit into black, I don't fit into Asian. And within those, there's probably about 10 different in there. So you get a lot of description there. You can choose exactly where you're from. And then when you get to other, which is where I sit, when you click other, it separates into Arab or other. And I'm not an Arab either, so I'm not clicking Arab. So then I click Arab, I click other, and that doesn't have statistical significance, so it never gets presented back. So the problem that then creates is we have conversations at work and in other environments that I'm in, where people say, 70% of the black staff are really unhappy here. And I say, well, there's more of them, so now you're making it sound like they're just unhappy people, when you're not actually getting into the granular of there's other people that are also not as happy or not getting the same development or not accessing CPD and progression opportunities, but you're now highlighting this community and you're actually highlighting them in quite a negative way as well because you put the spotlight on them. And this is where I'm saying we then start to target and pigeonhole work, and it's like, well, we have to do more to make the black staff more happy. If you actually speak to the black staff about what they want and how they feel, they then feel really alienated by some of that is being broadcasted about them. If you looked at other communities and you didn't add the diversity lens, you'd actually find that the general population at work is probably dealing with the same issues, feels the same way. And I mean, we say this a lot about schemes and programs that are put on. You have to start understanding how somebody feels once they're put on something specifically designed for them. You do feel quite alienated. You start getting treated differently. People start to say you're only in the position because you got the diversity bump up. And that presents its own challenges as well. So, I mean, I think we need to have some programming and some form of schemes and support networks in place, but we need to be very careful with the way that is then branded and seen and perceived by the wider communities that we're a part of as well.
So you're considered other.
Yeah, I'm definitely other. There's no box for me to choose. I just go to other and I type in proudly Turkish Cypriot. Until they add a box for me, I will still type it in myself. It just won't have statistical significance.
Yeah, so it should be more tailor-made, which is tough. You know, let's be honest. Are there any examples of successful things that have been incorporated over the last years, or maybe even yesterday, that show, well, yesterday's a little short, that show the first signs of, okay, that actually works. It actually helps. We're not there yet, but it helps. Do we have examples?
It's a really good point, and actually you'll notice that we all sort of looked at each other then and went, ooh. One of the biggest issues that we have in diversity in football is around talking about the positives of what we do. And fundamentally and specifically, and Dennis, obviously I've only known you for the last sort of 24 hours or so, but collectively these people and people who work in EDI in football do some amazing things. Having worked with Tajean, having known Cigdem now for a long time, you see some beautiful things. And there was a great man who once said to us that in his experience, we only, when something bad happens, we'll tell 6 out of 7 people. Whereas when something good happens, we'll only tell 1 out of those 7 people. And you know, if we talk about refereeing, apologies, that's maybe not what you were here to listen about at the moment. But we've seen the first black man to referee in the Premier League since Uriah Rennie achieved that status this year. We've seen the first woman ever to referee on the Premier League occur in the last year. Only the 4th woman to ever officiate on a Premier League fixture. We've seen the first British South Asian, which is fundamentally game-changing because now that creates role models. We've seen a wave of recruitment of referees from ethnic minority communities. We've seen a wave of recruitment and progression to keep these referees in the game and get them through the game, give them the resource that they need to be successful. So now we can start to see that representation on the field of play where it wasn't previously.
There's one I'd like to highlight specifically, which could be seen as being a bit of a maverick, but I'm going to go for it anyway. So a lot of people will allude to change being made in football and refer to change being a top-down effect, which is something I probably contributed to when I first started working in EDI and football, in terms of saying that change is going to come from the top down. Whereas I'm approaching about 8 years working in EDI now, and I've seen change come from the bottom up. If we're talking about points deductions being proposed at the Premier League and the EFL and across leagues across Europe, that's already been implemented in grassroots football in England. Specifically, when we're talking about, I believe the power is always going to be in the hands of the people. And we've seen professional players around the world being abused, and the notion is, why don't they walk off the pitch? Why don't they take matters into their own hands? Players at grassroots football have been walking off of the pitch for a very long time, which has forced a national governing body to reflect and to change their stance on how they support clubs who walk off the pitch and take matters into their own hands. So in regards to what is working well. I believe that football industry has to start looking at the ground and what the people are doing, because they actually start to take matters into their own hands. Not because they take pride in doing so, but because from their perspective, enough's enough. And we've spoken to authorities and we've gone down all of these legal and official routes for so long, nothing's been done. We're going to start doing things our way. And in the people doing things their way, that's when you start to see the officials start to take notice and start to put processes in place and change rules and regulations. I've never ever seen any issue come with a bit of revolution every now and again. And especially from my experiences within England, seeing people take matters into their own hand has definitely forced national governing bodies to take notice and to realise, hold on, we're doing things a bit wrong here. And I definitely want to encourage more people on the ground to realise that the power is actually in your hands. If you're looking at a triangle and how a triangle is constructed, and you've got the pro game at the top, you've got the academy sector in the middle, and grassroots at the bottom, grassroots at the bottom is going to be the most populated part of the triangle, which means the power in numbers is always going to be in the hands of the people. The issue is the unifying approach of the bottom of that triangle singing from the same hymn sheet is what's often been the enemy of progress there. But when that hymn sheet is being sung and sung in unison, the entire world notices, and I've definitely been encouraged by that.
The word notices is a trigger for me. I have a background in communications. I sometimes think, with all of this, all that I hear, and I'm an outsider. I did the One Love campaign, but and I have mixed children, and it's why I'm involved, and I will stay involved. But it sounds like an awareness problem. It sounds like people are not aware. If I follow discussions here in the Netherlands, which I still do, even though I live in the US, when it comes to, okay, why are there not enough black coaches on a high level, but even on a low level? But we have so many black players, so how is that possible? Where does it go wrong? The answer is often, they're not good enough. And I'm like, how can you say? If we need a black coach right now, and we can have any money in the world, and we would buy the best one out there, we have a choice of 5, I think, in Europe. That's not representation. But the problem, besides representation, because I totally agree, representation is very important. Therefore, again, Dennis, I applaud you, because I think that's very important to see what you are doing. But I do think, if you don't know, you don't know. That's what a friend of mine always says. And it's true. And I think there should be more awareness about what's missing. And you can say, well, he's not good enough, or yeah, maybe it costs too much to become a coach, which is true. It's especially here in the Netherlands, it's expensive. But it's also lack of role models and lack of awareness, I think, is so important. I don't know how to fix it. I mean, One Love is an awareness campaign, and it did good for a while, but it's just a campaign. It's still a marketing tool. What can we do as people, as lovers of the game, pro-diversity? What can we do to raise awareness? I don't know. This is an honest question. I don't know. If there's somebody out here that knows, then let me know, but can anybody?
I mean, not directed at the very top level of the game, but again, in the UK, one of the issues we have is the pipeline of the qualifications. So those qualifications, the cohorts on them aren't as diverse as they need to be, and this is probably relevant to referees as well. And that causes an issue because you expect people to have a set requirement to get a role. And that's really like the admin side of it. You need to have X to be able to get into X role. So we need to diversify that. We need to make it more accessible for people. And I mean that from a geography perspective. I mean that from the people delivering these courses. They need to be more relatable. They need to be more accessible so that we can see ourselves feeling more comfortable in those environments. But also from the financials and the actual pathways, understanding it, getting out to different environments and explaining and showing that this is actually a viable pathway for you. And then at the top levels, I think that's where, I mean, we say it's just a marketing thing, but the visual aspect of it does help. and understanding actually the power of words and the way we explain stuff. And again, we get a lot about headlines in the UK, the way the media portrays certain people when they make a mistake, an honest mistake, versus the way they portray someone else. Clubs then start to assess the risk attached to employing someone or putting someone in a certain position, that they will also be attached to some of that negative media just by association. And I don't think we give enough credit to how people make decisions at the top level, because you're not just bringing someone in from a football decision, but you're talking about the culture, the way they're going to engage, what's the exit going to look like for that person if the time comes to remove them from that environment or move them on. And we've not made that pathway easier for people from diverse, different backgrounds, different perspectives. Are we going to bring people on and actually allow them to use their strengths, to use their difference in thinking and perspective, or do we want them to just come in and employ them to do what you want every other person to do? There's no point in bringing diverse people into certain roles if you're not going to access the quality and the difference in having them in those positions. But I do think from a management and coaching perspective, it would be a big culture shift that you need, because you need to start presenting people, and the narrative needs to become more positive in the way of diversity. As you say, if we can count on one hand the diverse coaching staff, and that's not just limited to black staff, by the way. In the UK, the South Asian population is a massive percentage of the population, and they don't feature at all. And they don't feature on the pitch either. So, and I've said this to the individual members of the panel, but in the UK, we had some sort of narrative that we were told the pitch was diverse and the pitch should be representative of the backroom staff. And I was like, well, on the pitch, none of us are on the pitch, by the way. So we wouldn't get into those roles either. Saying that the England squad is diverse when there's people of mixed heritage, there's people that are from a white background and a black background, means that, you know, a black woman isn't represented, a black woman with a disability isn't represented, a black man from an LGBT background is not represented, and I'm not even getting to anyone beyond the black community that we're not representing on the pitch. So some of that, like the power of words and how we assume that a person from a black background is representative of all, is mind-blowing, to be honest. And we don't even then refer to the South Asian population, me as the other population, etc., etc., etc.
Maurice, I'm gonna have to disagree on that one. In regards to awareness, I believe the entire footballing world is aware. I believe that every single governing body, whether it be international or national or regional, I believe every league in the world and every football club, for the most part, has either created or endorsed or contributed to an awareness campaign of some sort when it comes to discrimination or being anti-discriminative. What I believe the footballing world lacks is courage. People who are brave enough and courageous enough to actually do something. We've become so obsessed with having conversations and making things a hashtag and doing all these vocal stuff to contribute to raising awareness, that we've become very deluded into believing that raising awareness is doing the thing. Raising awareness is a great contributing factor, but it's not doing the thing. It's very similar to the simple notion of, if you see somebody being discriminative, would you turn around and say that's wrong, or as in think that's wrong, or would you turn around and tell the person that it is wrong? It's two different things. And the football world across Europe, across the world, lacks individuals in positions of influence who are brave enough to say, what are we doing about this thing? Yes, we can create a campaign and give it all of the ad time in the world and have all of the halftime performances that highlight these situations and stuff. It's great. We're making it aware and have all the players take the knee and all these things. It's great, but it's not doing. And I really want to see a generation of football leaders come forward, whether it be in your local football club or your local league or in your institution or your organization. Challenge yourself to be brave. Challenge yourself to be courageous. Do something that might ruffle a feather, might get you in a bit of problems with your higher management, but you know that morally you're doing the right thing. And as it stands, there's way too many individuals who say they're contributing to being anti-discriminative or say they're anti-discriminative as following the flow of the ocean. That's not what being a maverick or changing the course of history means. It means doing things that other people won't necessarily do. And that's why I say we're in a state of laziness. It's because we're all engrossed in this idea of having the conversation is making a change. It's not. And I really want to see tangible things being done by individuals locally, nationally, internationally, and globally to help that ripple effect. Thank you. Very kind. Thank you.
Can we also say that some of the campaigns have the opposite impact, like taking the knee in the UK? It was eventually the players that just said, we're not doing this anymore because we're almost your puppet. We're not doing it. So the players themselves were saying, I'm not a part of it. And sometimes when we overdo certain campaigns, if they're not delivered in the right way or they're not being done with the right intentions, it actually has a negative impact, because then it has the opposite impact, because people start to say, oh God, like that topic again, and it just becomes, oh, let's skip that topic, rather than understanding it or engaging in it and trying to see the perspective that we're meant to. So I think it can be a double-edged sword if it's not delivered in the right way, or it's gone for an overkill, which we do a lot in the UK.
I agree, and if I combine those two, because I agree with you too, I think there's a difference between awareness and understanding. Because aware that the sea level is rising, that's one thing. Understanding what it will do to you, you don't know until it's here. And there's a difference between you knowing it's here and me knowing it's gonna be there. And that's sort of what I mean with awareness. Yeah, campaigns, I mean, I was surprised that One Love did that well. But on the other hand, it penetrated into the normal people, and they, for the first time, were like, oh, yeah, that is weird, sort of. We have to wrap up because it's 1 minute, 44 seconds. We can do that in 1 minute, but if you can change something tomorrow, right away, all the money in the world, what would you change?
Fair enough. I'll kick us off. For me, I think we can all make a business case for why diversity is important. We all know that a bigger customer base, people who feel like they belong in the organisation, will work more for you, will stay longer. But fundamentally, it's the moral piece. I mean, we're all here because we're good people. We all want to be part of football because we enjoy it, even if it gives us bad times. So fundamentally, we've got to retain that piece that says the moral element of why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing is because we're good people and we want to deliver good things.
Yeah, I hear you what you say. You're the moral. I totally agree with you on that point. And I think one of the most important thing is also the respect. Because if you don't have any respect for everyone, a lot of people, for me on the social media part, is they're not thinking a long time over this. They're like, oh, I see that comment. If you take a little room to breathe and something, you can do a lot more and a little bit more sensitive about it. And I think you can be a lot more repentive there.
Great. I'd say money. Money.
Evil.
Yeah. How you spend your money will obviously show somebody else or yourself where your priorities are. And as it stands, when you're looking at whether it's the Premier League or Kick It Out or the FA or Ajax, one of the least funded aspects of football right now is anything to do with equality, diversity, and inclusion. And that to me shows that it's very low on the priority list of organisations around the world. So if you increase the funds, increase the budgets, increase the amount of money that you put in this area, it will show the world that you're actually taking this seriously.
I think if I had a magic wand, I would try to reduce or eliminate the risk attached to doing the right thing and doing it for the right reasons, not always going back to the business case, not being afraid of something that's different, normalising it because there isn't a risk attached to it. If there wasn't that risk, I think a lot more people would be more proactive, including myself, to be honest. I have to weigh up, even on my social media, I have to weigh up what I can put out and what I should just be saying directly to my own organisation, just weighing up the risk attached to my own role.
Yeah, I agree with that too. It says please wrap up. I don't know if that means the time is up, but thank you everybody. 5:45, I think it's time for drinks and bitter balls after a topic like this for sure. But I hope you thought it was interesting. I think it is. I still learn a lot every time I do a panel like this. Thank you, all four of you, and thank you for being here today.